Good morning, each and every single one of you. Good afternoon if you're in the UK or on this side of the planet. Welcome to We Are Reading, and we are reading, of course, Blueprint for Black Power by Amos Wilson, Amos N. Wilson. And we're on chapter 12 of this book today. My apologies for the for the slightly late start today. It's been a nice sunny day outside today, so I've been spending a lot of time out there with my family. Make no apologies for that bit, but I am apologetic for the fact that it does mean that we started a little bit late this morning/afternoon. And so because of our late start, I'm gonna get right into business so we don't so we can use our use our slot wisely by getting right into business. Make sure you're subscribed, make sure you like, and please do share the video, please, on Facebook and Twitter and all that sort of good stuff. And yeah, let's get into it. Shout out to London Miss 234. Peace and blessings to you, family. Hope you're well. Hope you're good. Hope life is treating you well and your health and mental, physical, all that good stuff. Health is in the a place of ascension today. So yeah, good. A grand rising, I should say. Grand rising, good morning, all that good stuff. So I was just listening to the end of last week's live stream, and where we left off was on page 258, where Baba Amos Wilson was reading from a report from the National Urban League, all about basically giving statistics from 1993. Showing how the United States' economy was declining, was in a state of, was on life support. Maybe not life support, but was certainly very seriously ill. Really needed to look at its diet, maybe change its lifestyle, start to exercise more. To stretch that analogy way too far. So we were looking at how economically sick the United States was, and Baba Amos Wilson's point in talking about all of this sort of stuff, as we're going to kind of get into today, his point is that. When America declines, so also does African Americans decline. And this is a good point, interesting point, because it does speak to the crux of the matter when it comes to us Pan-Africanists, Black conscious people who are living in Babylon, wherever we might be, in the UK, US, and so forth. There is an uncomfortable reality that we really need the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Brazil. We really need these countries to be doing kind of okay, because if they're not, we're going to suffer. And the fact of the matter is, I think what we're going to read now in these next few pages is that history shows that when these imperialist nations do suffer, the canary in the mine is very often Black people. So the decline starts first with us, and so it's just an interesting reality. I often say how these white racists who come on, they say, if you don't like the UK so much, if you don't like the West so much, why don't you go back to Africa? And it's kind of like there's an element of truth in that. Do you know what I mean? There's an element of truth in that, which is why it's hard, obviously, for us older folks getting a bit long in the tooth. This is all we know. This is where we've been all our lives. We've got our friends, our family networks, and so on and so forth. So it's difficult, not to make an excuse for myself, but certainly for the youngsters, I think we want to try and make sure that our young, the watoto, the young African boys and girls, who we are hopefully raising to be as conscious as possible, are thinking on the lines of, listen, this doesn't need to be my only home. This UK doesn't need to be the only place that I know. I could go and move to wherever it might be. So anyway, on that note, let's get into this. So we're on page 258, and we're going to read as follows to finish off this section with regard to the end of the United States economic turmoil and the impact that has on the African Americans. Shout out to you. I presume that's Lao Tzu, because that greeting looks very familiar. Grand rising, beautiful ebony people in the year 532 of the Ma'afa, 16th of March. Is it the Ides of March even, or is that the 15th of March? Anyway, it seems that a section of Urugu are committed to a human extinction in this war with Russia, potential war with Iran and China. Yeah, let's face it, the The modern world, led as it is by the United States and others, they are obsessed with war, aren't they? They're obsessed with destruction because there's almost like an intrinsic link between progress and development and economic growth. There's those things kind of rely on death and destruction and mayhem, which is why the period after wars is always like the fastest economic growth you'll ever have, because they've blown everything up, haven't they? They've killed a bunch of people, they've destroyed infrastructure. Disaster capitalists come in and say, woohoo, let's build. And it's boom time, always after war, boom time, because stuff needs to be built and ting and ting. So, grand rising to you, my family. Here we go. So the report, this is the report by the National Urban League, which we read at the end of last week into the statistics about United States economic decline. The report goes on to comment, quote, "In combination, these conditions and trends bespeak a reduction in the American standard of living and have even more ominous implications for the future. African Americans have suffered disproportionately and face the bleakest prospects," unquote. One of the major structural changes in the United States economy has been its increasingly steady shift from the production of manufactured goods to the production of services. The report notes that this shift, which includes the continuing long-term contraction of the industrial sector of the United States economy, is arguably the most profound economic change to occur in the United States since the Industrial Revolution. Bloomberg, along with many others, have noted that the loss of their hold on the industrial infrastructure, i.e., the almost precipitous decline of manufacturing in the inner cities of America, is primarily responsible for their assumption of the contours of underdevelopment. From his analysis of the effects of American deindustrialization on inner city communities in his book, The Truly Disadvantaged, William Julius Wilson concludes that the chief factor behind the rapid deterioration of African American inner city communities across the nation has been the loss by Blacks of manufacturing jobs, a primary source of Black employment and livable wages. The continuing loss of manufacturing jobs and the relatively high wages and job security they provided has contributed mightily to the growth of an increasingly large Black urban underclass, or Black underclass. It has resulted in the destabilization and destruction of working class and poor Black families, the creation of female-headed families, and in assorted problems prevalent in the inner city today. Now, hopefully this is just straightforward stuff, and hopefully we all know this, but there are many people who probably don't get that. Many people who probably don't understand that point. So I'm glad that we're reading this book, and hopefully some people will learn something learn these more basic things from the reading of the book that we're doing here. So it is Lao Tzu. All right, Lao Tzu, you said, in response to the return to Africa comment, my response is, I will gladly go if you and your kind will remove your tentacles and exercise non-interference. Yeah, this is true. Yeah, broken phone. Oh dear, broke phone on Thursday. Well, I'm very grateful that you still come and joined us, and I hope you get your phone fixed soon. And that is the thing, isn't it? It's like, it wouldn't be so bad in Africa and the Caribbean if these people would stop messing around with our, So it's like, you come out. You come out. If you want to say come out of my country, well, you come out of my country then. Let's everyone go back, come out of your country and stop messing with our countries, and then maybe we can start afresh. So yeah, there we go. So yeah, these social maladies which we have in African American communities and Black communities around the globe are largely the result of the loss of jobs and wages, and as a result, the lack of stability, the lack of prospects, and the lack of hope that came with the deindustrialization, has come with deindustrialization. And bear in mind, that book that we just quoted for was written in 1993. That's 30 years ago, 31 years ago. It's just got even more, more bleak since then. So back to Baba Amos. The still heavy dependence of African Americans on the manufacturing sector of the economy and on the service sectors, which are likely to decline in the near future, interesting, means that there is a, quote, bad fit between the current distribution of the African American workforce and the reconfiguring industrial and service base. And this is a point in Baba Amos's lectures. He used to make this point very clearly, and it's such a shame that he transitioned when he did, basically before even this book was published in 1998, because I would have loved to have heard his analysis of that point with regard to basically the growing obsolescence of Black people in America and in the West, generally speaking. Because I wonder, how many of us or people who read this book back then in the 1990s. I didn't, I was too young to have got my head around this sort of stuff back then. Yeah, probably. How many of our people saw Baba Amos reading the tea leaves, given the prognosis of with regard to the future of the economic prospects, and made changes with regard to, okay, cool, maybe let's stop focusing so much on education in this way, let's shift it to education this way. How many of our people, for example, maybe focused a bit more on technology, digital technology? How many people saw that as the root? And even now, me as a parent, what am I doing? It's blatantly obvious to see that the service sector jobs that I do, white collar kind of jobs, AI is going to sweep all of them up. I'm literally currently using AI to massively in my job, and not secretly, like massively in my job. AI is being used in loads of different ways. That is, give it 5-10 years time, a job like mine probably won't exist anymore. What am I doing to prepare my children for that reality? One of the thoughts that pops into my mind is that I need to start teaching my children about open AI, chat GPT. I need to start making sure that they grow up understanding that these are things and they should use them. So anyway, there you go. So the still heavy, no, I read that already. A review of tables 12.1 and 12.2 clearly indicates why the fit between the economic prospects of the African American community and projected growth rates of the major occupational categories between 1990 and 2005 is not very good. And basically what you have here on page 259 are those two tables, and it shows that African Americans as of 1993 were mainly in the following types of jobs. Wow. Is that right? So 31, the biggest single chunk were nursing aides. Nursing aides, is that right? Okay. Then 31%, that is nursing aides. Oh, I suppose that's like that's care workers, we call them here. And actually, that's true. Yeah, here in the UK, a lot of Black people are care workers. I.e., they either work in old people's homes or they go to old people's homes to help them out. Shout out to Tito District. Peace. Salama. What's going on? RBG love and blessings and care and love to you and yours. Hope you're well. My Zimbabwean cousin, because Uganda and Zimbabwe, we're basically, there's very much of a muchness. They just traveled. Did we travel further up the Nile, or did they just stay down there? And obviously we could get into the history of it all, but yeah, we're very closely related. My dad often says that I've said this many times, but my dad often says that when he hears people speaking Shona, he thinks there's, he basically can understand most of it because he can speak Luganda, and our language Lugisu. We're very, very similar. So yeah, hope you're well, family, literally, almost. So yeah, sorry, nursing aides made up 31%. Then domestic servants, 29%. Postal clerks, 27%. Hotel maids and housemen, 27%. Laundry and dry cleaning, 26%. Wait on, do these figures add up? 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. No, they don't. I don't understand these figures. Or is that I don't know. Anyway, I'm not quite sure what how these numbers are kind of working, but basically it's showing that the majority of people of Black Americans in those days were working in these very blue collar type jobs, if you want to call it. And then the next table shows that the sectors that are going to stagnate are exactly those kind of sectors. And the sectors that are going to grow are the technical, professional, technicians, sales, and all this sort of stuff. So basically the point he's making is that as of 1993, the African American community was facing decline. Oh, thank you, Erica. Thank you, Erica McInnes. So I was trying to work out why these percentages don't add up, because there's 30%, 30%, 25, 25, 26, 25, 23. And of course, Erica makes the sensible point that people can have more than one job, or their jobs can fit into more than one category, I suppose. I'm gonna have to look into that. But yeah, that's the point. The percentages aren't going to come up to 100% because of that point. So, shout out to you as well, my sister. I hope you're well. So, page 259, as can be readily surmised from this review, African Americans are greatly underrepresented in the fastest growing occupations and overrepresented in the slowest, in those having the slowest projected growth. This pessimistic assessment, Afro-pessimist perhaps? Anyway, this pessimistic assessment is not helped by the fact that educational status and human capital characteristics of the African American community as a whole are generally very unfavorable relative to its ability to gain its fair share of high growth, high paying jobs, and its ability to engage in high compensatory entrepreneurial activities. It's on page 260 now. In light of these and other facts, the National Urban League, in part, concluded the following quote. In short, the shifting occupational structure does not bode well for the economic future of African Americans. Both their current placement in the labour market and their relative position on the hierarchy of educational attainment are major constraints. Relieving these constraints, i.e. improving the fit, is essential to the overall economic well-being of the African American community in the years ahead, but the challenge may be even more complicated than that, unquote. And then Baba Amos says, the economic outlook of Black America, particularly its quote-unquote underclass, is such that one writer concludes, the Black Americans, quote this is, Black Americans have outlived their usefulness. Their raison d'etre, however you say that in French, their reason for existing to this society has ceased to be a compelling issue. Once an economic asset, they are considered an economic drag. The wood is all hewn, the water is all drawn, the cotton all picked, and the rails reach from the coast to coast, i.e. the train lines have all been built. The ditches are all dug, the dishes are put away, and only a few shoes remain to be shined. Wowzers, that's a tough talk, isn't it? From Samuel F. Wyatt, which is from a book called The Choice, The Issue of Black Survival in America, page 18. So let's get into this a little bit more then. This next section here on page 260 is called American Decline, Black Decline. While many analysts may attribute America's relative economic decline to foreign competition, other analysts have given greater priority to other factors. Of course, the overwhelming balance of payment problem, unprecedented trade deficits, the growing non-competitiveness of much of American industry must in part be held accountable for many of the economic problems plaguing the United States. However, as much, if not more, of these problems can also be attributed to white America's external and internal policies having to do with power and race relations. Both the attempt by white America to maintain its economic and military dominance in the world and racial dominance in the nation has worked to negatively skew and to weaken its overall economy and jeopardize the living standards of large segments of its native population, including the African American community. On the global level, white America's attempts to maintain, expand, and protect its worldwide political economic empire is based on its development and maintenance of a permanent war economy. While there is evidence that military spending associated with war might temporarily invigorate an economy, as did war production during World War II, a permanent war economy, i.e., permanent war production, as has essentially been the case with the US economy since World War II, may ultimately debilitate or distort it. Citing the work of Melman, 1965-1974, Bergman in 1980 asserts that for the past several decades, quote, the United States had diverted gargantuan amounts of money, manpower, and resources into military production, the inevitable byproducts of which have been the neglect, depletion, deterioration, and exhaustion of vast areas of the civilian economy, its industrial base, and the underlying infrastructure, unquote. Shout out to the pro-Black perspective, brother Oni. Shout out to you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Always good to have you on board. Looking forward to your insights and inputs as well as ever, my good brother. So, economic dislocations occur in a war economy, which tends over time to retard its ability to produce products of ordinary economic use, value, products useful for enhancing standards of living through the production of new and innovative consumer tools and services, and useful for further production, for example, machine tools used to make other products. This can and does occur despite spin-offs from defense production to civilian production. For example, commercial aircraft and computers. The point there he's making is that what often happens, like this thing here that we're using to communicate right here, the internet, the World Wide Web, was developed for the military in the 1960s. It's very fascinating history when you read up on it. But yeah, the whole concept of sending packets of data from one computer to another, which is what the internet basically does, just really fast, was developed for the American military in the 1960s initially. And probably quite a lot of other technological things. What tends to happen? What was I reading about? I was reading about quantum mechanics, quantum biology. And anyway, I was listening to a lecture and someone was basically saying, yeah, because it's very speculative still, but this guy was basically saying, yeah, what will probably happen? I've noticed that the Western science always looks at, okay, what products can we make as a result of this knowledge? So how can we come up with some products? As opposed to just knowledge for knowledge's sake, or knowledge for how can people use this knowledge in our lives without it necessarily needing to result in products. But anyway, this person was talking about how what will probably happen is that this quantum mechanics will and quantum biology specifically will find its way into certain products, and of course those products will be warfare-based products, won't they? Because that's what usually happens. Urugu tends to want to make stuff that will kill and maim and destroy the other. And so that is true. Mother Amos Wilson saying, yeah, it is true that stuff that comes from the military often does eventually end up in mainstream society, but that's limited. That's a limited thing. The military priorities of the United States have been such, this is on page 261, by the way, have been such that a vast proportion of its enormous wealth has been siphoned off by relatively non-productive military and geopolitical investments, thereby forcing it to lose vital opportunities to build and rebuild the American civilian and commercial economy, and to expand and upgrade the American economic infrastructure. And I suppose a similar point would be made for somewhere like the DPRK, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which is normally known as North Korea. They're in just a constant war state, understandably, because they're in a constant threat of, annihilation from the United States. And I would imagine that like a humongous portion of their GDP is diverted to military, and it probably does result in them having a very strong military. They've got the nuclear, they've got nuclear weapons, for example. However, if you look at it probably more holistically, that country is probably in a really unhealthy state economically, because it's just so obsessed with war all the time. So, capital, manpower, and research funds, largely dedicated to military and geopolitical priorities, essentially exposed the underfunded and inadequately organized economic structure to damaging, often fatal foreign competition. Aha. This sentiment is supported by Paul Kennedy's two major works related to the subject: The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers, 1987, and Preparing for the 21st Century, Winners and Losers, 1993. Kennedy, in an article in the New York Review, 1993, contends that, and this is a quote here, bottom of page 261, while its military power boosts the United States' place in the world affairs, that may not necessarily be a blessing for the nation as a whole. The high defense burden has caused some economic damage and given an advantage to commercial rivals like Japan and Germany. While some strategic thinkers debate whether forces should be withdrawn from Europe and concentrated against out-of-area threats in the developing world, it's 10 years before the war on terror. The simpler days when, anyway. Where are we? Out of area threats in developing worlds. Others wonder about the utility of military force in general, since the threats to America may now come not from nuclear weapons, but from environmental hazards, drugs, and loss of economic competitiveness. $300 billion a year bought military security for the United States, but it also diverted resources, capital, the armed forces personnel, materials, skilled labor, engineers, and scientists from non-military production. In 1988, for example, over 65% of federal research and development money was allocated to defense, compared with 0.5% to environmental protection and 0.2% to industrial development, page 262. Moreover, while engaging Moscow in an expansive arms race, America has had to compete for world market shares against allies like Japan and Germany, which have allocated smaller percentages of their national resources to the military, thus freeing capital, personnel, and research and development for commercial manufacture, which has undermined parts of the American industrial base. Interesting. I guess Japan, it's interesting you meant that quote mentioned Japan and Germany, because Japan and Germany, as I understand it, after they were defeated in 1945, they were prevented from building up their militaries again. So Japan definitely, I mean, both of them, Japan and certainly Germany, have got a very long, proud history of warmongering. So they would absolutely have built up their war machine if they were allowed to. But the rest of the Western world had kind of like cottoned on to the fact that Germans appear to have a really, really intense bloodlust. And so, they needed to defang them. Otherwise, they'll just continually keep invading everybody else. I mean, damn, England, Anglos. This is the Anglo-Saxons. Those were German tribes who came here, and some say they came peacefully, but they probably didn't. They probably came and invaded and killed off a bunch of Celts, and that's how we got this country in the first place. England, land of the Angles. So, while the issue as to whether high defense spending enhances or slows the commercial, if not the overall economy, is not resolved, it seems quite clear that such spending otherwise changes the structure of the economy. Such changes and possible distortions which hobble the economy with an unhealthy mixture of strengths and weaknesses, occupational dislocations, indebtedness, financial frailties, deficits in trade and current accounts, low productivity in important sectors, and markedly uneven distribution of its wealth, inevitably trail immense social problems in their wake. And among those social problems is the economic destabilization and social ruination of predominantly African American inner city communities. Very interesting. And Lao Tzu, you asked the question, Amos wrote this 30 years ago. How's the United States now? Yeah, I think that all of these trends that we're talking about here have got even worse. So I think the debt, for example, the debt to GDP ratio in the United States is insane at the moment. Partly, COVID kind of really exploded a lot of the national debt of a lot of these Western countries, having to pay for furloughing and rare. But yeah, of course, it's just got worse and worse and worse since that time. So the next section here is page 262, industrial and government policy. And remember, please do remember to like the video, like the stream as well, if you could, please, if you haven't already done so, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed as well. Let's get into this. Page 262. American industry has also contributed to the breakdown and restructuring of the civil economy through its own competitive relations with its foreign counterparts. The rapid diffusion of technology and managerial know-how across international borders has been and is presently aided and abetted by their sale and transfer to the industrial and service sectors of other nations, European and Asian, by the American industrial sector itself. Bloomberg, this is Paul Bloomberg in a book called Inequality in an Age of Decline, commented on this situation thusly. I like that word, thusly. It's a funny word, thusly. It is not the natural process of technological diffusion alone that has eroded America's technological lead, however. By their massive sale of advanced technology abroad via licensing agreements, patent sales, and other forms of technology transfer, American corporations are exporting America's future and undermining its industrial base. The United Electronic Radio and Machine Workers of America, UE, which is a union, reported that some 11,600 foreign technical aid agreements concluded by Japanese firms from the end of World War II to 1970, so of those 11,600, approximately 6,000 were with American companies, i.e., the majority of them were not, or nearly half of them were with foreign companies. Developing these patents in the United States originally cost over 120 billion US dollars, but Japanese industry bought the patent rights for these technological departments for only 2.7 billion, or what the AFL-CIO calls fire sale prices. And the point here, as we just go into page 263, a point to really to recognize is that is probably to not think of this as like some weird anomalous situation. So Baba Amos is showing us that America has declined economically, but American firms have contributed to this decline by selling off, technology to firms based elsewhere. And the point is that this is something to remember about capitalism. Capitalism isn't really, you could argue, isn't very conducive to nation states, nationalism, because frankly, money isn't particularly bothered about borders. Money moves very freely across borders. Ideas move very freely across borders, and profits can move very freely. Well, particularly once we got into digital money, digital ideas, digitization of everything, it's like, well, what's going to bring the most profit is the bottom line. That's the bottom line. These companies are going to do what's going to bring the most profit. And if bringing the most profit to that company, even if it's domiciled in the United States, if the thing that's going to bring in the most profit is going to be selling off all their assets to foreign investors or literally moving all the jobs offshore, they're going to do that because it's good for their bottom line and for their shareholders, even if it's shitting over the masses of American people as a whole. So this is one of the things that I often it's important to have this in mind, that whenever you're looking at global politics or national politics or whatever, always remember that there's this kind of friction between make America great again and this, that, and the other, and let's make money, cash rules everything around me kind of thing. Because cash rules everything around me, usually often is going to mean, let me shit on my community kind of thing. Pardon my French. So page 263. While such transfers were beneficial to international economic development and to some American multinational corporations, their contribution to devastating foreign competition and to injurious domestic dislocations and restructuring, which are undermining the economic viability of America. Well, hang on a sec, that's a long sentence. Their contribution to devastating financial foreign competition and to injurious domestic dislocations and restructuring, which are undermining the economic viability of the African American community and of the worldwide African community, cannot be denied. Whoa, it's a big sentence. While the sale or transfer of notoriously aged or virtually obsolete technology and know-how to African enterprises move at a snail's pace, American corporations sell or transfer the latest generation of advanced technology to Western Europe and East Asian countries. Interesting. This has permitted sophisticated foreign corporations to develop and innovate these factors and eventually outflank the United States in international trade. So let's come back to that in a second. Shout out to you, Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu, you said, here in the United States, there are a significant number of people who believe that the Chinese steal American technology versus that a significant amount of it was given to them. Yeah, exactly. Precisely. I think that the thing, there's a lot of deception that goes on in people think that because they watch TV and they listen to Trump and they think that, oh, there's the most fundamental sort of schisms in the world. The most fundamental issues are that the teams are Americans versus Chinese versus Russians versus Nigerians. The media spins this narrative of there's that there's this unified team called America, which is fighting against this other unified team called China. But of course, this news coverage and mainstream media coverage just is not going to go into the real details about the fact that, and this is why you do need a class analysis, amongst other things, to understand that the upper classes or the ruling classes, ruling elites of China will have a lot more in common with the ruling elites of the United States. And this is something, funny enough, that those on the political right really play on quite a lot, interestingly, because they talk about globalism. I first heard that term from Alex Jones, which I believe InfoWars, Prison Planet, 15 years ago, talking about, maybe even 20, coming up to 20 years ago, but talking about the globalists and this, that, and the other. There's this, what they often do, obviously, they say, oh, it's the Jews are behind this globalist cabal who are trying to, destroy everybody else. But so, they're definitely on it with regard to the fact that there is much more unity within the ruling classes than you would expect from reading the media and all this sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean? They're here to make money. They're here to do business with one another. They're not so concerned about these nationalistic tit for tat squabbles and stuff like that. It doesn't really concern them because they'll just go where the money is, which is why I make this point all the time as well, which is why in the United Kingdom here, the current prime minister is of South Asian descent. The last three, I think, 3 or 4 maybe economists, what they're called, chancellors, were of South Asian or even African descent. One of them, the next chancellor potentially is going to be because these conservatives, who are basically the party of the establishment, to an extent, they don't care about the race and all this sort of stuff. They're not so bothered as long as your mind is white, basically. Doesn't matter. Come and be the leader of our country, black man or Asian man. Do it. It's fine. It doesn't matter. As long as you're going to look out for our financial needs, So, after reviewing this process, and sorry, the other point that Baba Amos made there, which is interesting, is that the United States, the corporate America made no effort, very little effort to share any technology or skills or whatever with African Americans, and yet there they were selling it at bargain basement prices to the Chinese, to the Japanese, and so on and so forth. So after reviewing this process further, he concludes, this is Paul Bloomberg, the following, quote, finally, as America loses its comparative advantage in many areas of manufacturing, some United States companies are gradually shifting their corporate efforts from manufacturing domestically to developing and marketing technology abroad. Instead of directing their energies toward producing competitively in the United States, some firms now find it easier and more profitable simply to transfer manufacturing operations and the advanced technology underlying it abroad. Unquote. It is also important to note that not all foreign competition is foreign. A measurable proportion of foreign competition which is creating problems for the American economy has been and is created by the investment and industrial policies of the United States government and American corporations themselves. In order to gain access to foreign markets and to better position themselves to reduce costs so as to compete more effectively with foreign corporations, many United States multinational corporations have been investing increasing billions of dollars in manufacturing facilities abroad. Moreover, such investments often involve the downsizing or closing of domestic factories or removing them offshore to Europe, Asia, Mexico, and other non-African third world countries. The investment facilities created in foreign countries by American corporations form a major portion of what is referred to as direct foreign investment. While such investment may earn foreign exchange for the investing corporation and nation, it may also markedly damage the domestic economy for the reasons that it, A, alters the distribution of income in favor of capital and to the disadvantage of labor. Page 264 now. B, causes a loss of domestic employment and of government tax revenue, especially where tax laws provide incentives for overseas investment, as in the United States. Speeds the diffusion of economic power and technological know-how abroad. And D, increases the domestic market concentration of large firms. For the past 2 decades, foreign investment by United States corporations have been immense. By 1976, US direct foreign investment amounted to $137 billion. Between 1975 and 1991, United States direct investment amounted to $450 billion, the largest bulk of which went to Western European countries, with some $26 billion in 1990 going to emerging countries with the skilled workforces. So I guess that would be like, Japan, China, that sort of place. In 1991, US manufacturers invested largely in the industrialized countries of Europe and Canada. As reported in the Wall Street Journal, this is in October 92, a study conducted by the firm of Ernst & Young notes that less than 1/3 of 659 major investments abroad by United States manufacturers in 1991 went to countries with low labor rates. Contradicting the popular notion that United States manufacturers would automatically elect to invest in countries where labor is cheapest, if given the opportunity, these countries use their foreign investments chiefly to gain access to markets. Okay, interesting. Apparently, looking to build market share in industrialized countries by accessing customers' technology and skills, as well as in responding to financial incentives and low corporate tax rates offered by these countries, United States companies placed more than half of their investments abroad in Europe. The most popular single recipient of United States investment, however, was Canada, where 84 of the 659 major investments were made. The journal reported that Mexico and the now disbanded Soviet Union were the only countries with low hourly wages that were among the top 10 countries where US manufacturers chose to invest in 1991. Okay, so Brother Oni said, in all fairness, I don't understand why they'd give the technology to black Americans or black Africans. Yeah, and I suppose Brother Amos is trying to point out, just highlight the fact that, the United States elites, the ruling elite, the corporate elite, and so forth, have no real interest in, not only no interest in developing African Americans, in solving the poverty and the problems and so forth, but actually, are happily and willingly allowing or contributing to the destruction of these communities by all of these things that we're talking about here, sending the money overseas, investing overseas and so on and so forth. And if I'm reading this bit that we're reading now accurately, the point in that last passage about most of this investment going to wealthy countries, basically, or countries with high labor rates, is that so he says, this contradicts the notion that US manufacturers would invest in countries where labor is cheapest. And he's saying that no, it's not. They're not investing where labor is cheap. They're not driven necessarily by making things cheaper. They seem to be being driven by selling things to wealthy consumers. So they want market access. They want to get access to consumers in Germany, France, Britain, Canada, and so on. That's the motive, is to sell to these people. So let's see how he develops this point a little bit more. So down at the bottom of page 264, going into page 265, Edward Greenberg aptly cautions us about drawing erroneous conclusions from the apparent character of US foreign direct investment. Now, and this is a quote from that person, it may be argued that the heavy investment in Western economies disproves the contention that American corporations are involved or interested in the exploitation of third world natural resources. Okay, so people might say, "Oh, see, America isn't exploiting the global South because they're not pouring money into those places. They're not. So what's the contradiction to that then? It's important to point out, therefore, that much of the investment in Western Europe, Canada, and Japan is in firms that are themselves heavily involved in the third world. Moreover, the 40% of direct investment in the less developed parts of the world is important. 40% is not an insignificant figure. It is a major portion of all overseas United States economic activities by corporations and accounts for a very high percentage of its profits, unquote. And then moreover, the trend for foreign direct investments by United States and foreign corporations is moving increasingly in favor of the developing nations. This is also the case regarding portfolio investments. Robert Ross and Kent Tract, in their study of global capitalism, also noted this trend, and here's a couple of paragraphs from this. Quote, US foreign investment in manufacturing in the third world third world, again, 1998, that's what people were saying. The developing world wasn't so popular back then, or the global South was probably a good 10 years before becoming more common parlance. So, let me start again, sorry. The US foreign investment in manufacturing in the third world has grown both absolutely and relatively to investment in traditional sectors. This supports the proposition that spatial mobility has emerged as a new and critical form of competition for US manufacturing capital. The available data show recent increases in the flow of manufacturing investment to the periphery for the other major core industrial powers. As of 1971, 42% of the stock of British direct investment in the periphery was in manufacturing industries. By 1979, that figure had increased to 57%. In 1980, 68% of the outflow of German direct investment to the periphery, i.e. the poorer parts of the world, was in manufacturing. The surge of Japanese foreign investment to the periphery during the 1970s was also concentrated in such manufacturing industries like textiles, iron, steel, and electronics. Overall, according to the United Nations Center on Transnational Corporations, in the 1970s, particularly the latter years, foreign investment in manufacturing accounted for an increasing share of direct investment from developed to developing countries. Okay. In contrast to the area of monopoly capitalism, manufacturing capital from other regions is now flowing to the third world in substantial amounts. In fact, investment in manufacturing in the periphery now exceeds investment in raw material extraction. Okay. So let me, Brother Oni's Brother Oni's doing his thing. Right, okay, here we go then. Question or point from Brother Oni, pro-black perspective. My thing is, why would seeking greater profits be seen as negative? I never understand that in the American discourse. Going into business to make money makes more sense to me. Yeah, and I don't think that Baba Amos Wilson is even arguing that seeking to make profit is a problem. I suppose I'll be later on in the book, but I suppose the point will be that there are great profits to be made from upskilling your population and creating domestic markets. There's profits to be made there as well, I suppose you could argue, but there's a opposition to sharing any of the wealth with Black Americans, African Americans, I suppose is the point. Some of this stuff, this is where I think Afro-pessimism is useful, in that it could probably be argued that there are some practices that Western countries, majority white countries in particular, do, which actually hinder profitability of their firms and so on and so forth. But their need to, their anti-blackness supersedes their need for profit. So I know I said earlier that profit is the most important thing, but it's not, because companies would be able to make, I said this last week as well, companies would be able to make more money if they were able to sell to more consumers, domestic consumers such as African Americans. But there were all those things in place to shut African Americans out of economic growth that the rest of the country was experiencing. Maybe you could say that the economic growth was somehow intrinsically linked to African Americans being kept down, perhaps. I don't know, but I don't know what you think about that, bro. So we were, where were we? We were on page 265. And we read a long quote there to say that actually a growing proportion of foreign direct investment from the United States and other Western countries was going, in the developing world, was going into manufacturing. Let's read more then. Ross and Tract go on to indicate how standard foreign direct investment figures may inadvertently obscure the true magnitude of this type of economic activity. Quote, while the data on foreign direct investment in manufacturing are impressive, they do not capture comprehensively the relocation of manufacturing production to the periphery by core capital. Subcontracting is one means of capital relocation not included in foreign direct investment data. For example, in the apparel industry, i.e. clothes, firms frequently subcontract the sewing of garments to independent jobbers located in a low-wage country. This is page 266 now. The jobbers are not formal subsidiaries of the apparel firm, and the firms may make no direct equity investment in plant and equipment to the low-wage site. Yet, in a very real sense, the payment to a jobber is the functional equivalent of a direct foreign investment. For it is the foreign apparel firm that provides the capital to finance the sewing machines needed to sew the garments. Joint ventures are another means of redeploying production, whose impact is not fully reflected in direct foreign investment data. General Motors' joint venture with a Korean automobile manufacturer illustrates this point. By acquiring a share of the Korean firm and agreeing upon a joint project to produce a new subcompact car for the US market, General Motors began the process of shifting production from plants in the United States that currently make subcompacts to plants in Korea. Yet, because the Korean firm has existing plants, the amount of capital flow recorded is less than would have occurred if GM had to build a new plants in Korea. Global financial capital has also played a role in the movement of manufacturing production to the periphery that is not reflected in direct investment data. The available research suggests that a significant portion of the enormous loans that have been extended to third world countries in the past 15 years have financed private and state-owned manufacturing facilities in the periphery. This means global capital has available. What? This means global capital has available for shifting. This means global capital has available for shifting manufacturing production to sites in peripheral countries. Oh, sorry, I'm reading it wrong. Sorry. The means global capital has available for shifting manufacturing production to sites in peripheral countries are many and varied. Direct investment is the most visible, but it understates the magnitude of the employment that has transpired in recent decades. Okay. So, all right, let's carry on this. In regard to the developing countries, Fortune magazine in 1992 noted as follows: foreign direct investment in developing countries is unevenly distributed. The economies of East Asia take the tiger share. Good term. Between 1986 and 1990, the developing countries altogether received, on average, $26 billion of the foreign direct investment a year. Of that, East and Southeast Asia's share was $14 billion, Latin America's $9 billion, and Africa's $3 billion, unquote. As can be readily inferred from these figures, the overwhelming bulk of foreign direct investment involves investments from the industrial US to industrialized countries elsewhere. These countries are ethnically predominantly Caucasian or Asian. Africa receives very, very little, reflecting a lack of US government and industrial sector interest in that continent. Page 267. In fact, direct foreign investments in sub-Saharan Africa amounted to only 0.46% of the total US foreign direct investment abroad in 1990. Goodness me. We can easily see that the nature of American investment and trade relations follows the color line in rapidly decreasing proportion from white to in between to black. Consequently, the trend of ethnic power and economic relations, which inhere domestically, is also reflected by US foreign trade and investment patterns abroad. So that's an important point. It's an internally coherent point. When you look at the book, as a consider how internally coherent it is. One of the points that Baba Amos Wilson has made a lot is that the East Asian expat communities in America are very organized, very socially, racially and ethnically united, let's just say. Yeah, they work together. They've got a strong racial awareness or ethnic awareness, and even though they don't have much by way of direct political influence, their economic clout is somehow having an impact on the behaviors of the corporations and so on. I believe he would say there. So the fact that a lot of this investment, foreign direct investment from the United States, is going to Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and wherever else it might be, Vietnam even, and whatnot. That fact is, I presume he would argue, or he's going to go on to argue, that fact is in part a reflection of the fact that those communities here in the US are organized and so on and so forth. Perhaps, I don't know, but it's a strong point. It's a provocative and strong point he's making there, that basically American FDI follows the same color line as exists within America itself. Let's carry on. Thank you everyone who's with us, by the way, in the live chat. Make sure you like and make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure as well that you join my mailing list, eliwananda.substack.com. Open a new tab and you can maybe do that real quick now if you haven't already done so. I wanted to say as well, sorry, one more thing I wanted to point out is before we come on to this self-hating comment from Brother Oni, his words, mate, his words, fam. Before we come into this comment, I just want to say that I am going to start an ongoing. I'm going to start making videos about all the sciencey stuff that I'm reading about. I was aiming to create this enormous, comprehensive, greatest ever YouTube video on sunlight and black health, but I keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking, adding new things, finding out new things, going back and having to reconsider slides I'd had before, and I'll keep going down these rabbit holes. I'm very inquisitive into science. So basically what I'm going to do It's just keep putting videos out, short videos about, okay, look, I found out this about the solar spectrum. I found out that about the impact of sunlight on blood pressure, because that's a very interesting point. I found at this point about the impact of sunlight on, neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. I'll just put them out. I'll just put them out in short form, but often, and just get them out there. Start to build up a catalog of science and technology oriented stuff, and that'll be the third of my 3 products, if you like. We are reading every Saturday or every weekend. Most weekends we read together, book club. Then we got Mindful Black Dad, which is the website there, which I'm gradually, slowly building up to be a portal for educational resources for our children. And then the other unnamed thing, Science and Technology Review, whatever you want to call it, that I will put out as well. So watch out for that, and subscribe to the Substack so that you can kind of get updated on when that comes out. Now, self-hating, his words, not my words. Brother Oni said this. I'll say this, at the risk of sounding self-hating, but if you asked me who has the best scientific and mathematical proficiency on the planet for high-skilled labor and therefore engineering investments, obviously I love our people, but it's fair to say maybe objectively they'd be the best investment. What? They'd be the best investment. I say this as someone who sees how good Americans are academically and remembering, have I missed a comment or something? Amos what's this? Then Amos pointing out how Asians had really good schools. I feel like there's a comment missed there, because you said, at the risk of sounding self-hating, who has the best scientific and mathematical proficiency on the earth for high-skilled labor? I feel like you were basically saying that it's the Asians. The Asians are the ones to, so you're going to invest there because they have the most technically proficient people. Yeah, is that what you? Yeah, let me have a look. Yes, the Asians. And so, yeah, you go, the Asians. I mean, yeah, but that doesn't come out of nowhere, does it? If that is the case, and we don't know that's the case, by the way, we don't necessarily know that's the case. But if it is the case, which it may well be the case, that they, Asians have a large number of people to hire and employ. That's the case because of, take Japan. Japan's a good example. Japan wasn't some technological super country of whiz kids in 1945. Here we go. Let's just the Asians would be an objectively better investment. Sorry, comment limit. And then nah, I wouldn't invest, but I can see why whites do. Yeah, we make it out like Africans should be invested in. Yeah, I suppose that's the key point there. What was I saying? Just on the Asia point, those countries, Korea, for example, Korea didn't, and Japan, both of them, they weren't in 1945, prior to their rises in the sort of 60s and 70s onwards. They were, Korea, it's often said that Korea was like just a basket case nation, very poor, very, very backward, and so on and so forth. So you said Japan were pretty technologically savvy. They nearly created a bomb. Yeah, I mean, they're war like, it's the bloodlust. Got to compartmentalize Japan because they have the bloodlust. But let me just stop refuting my point. Korea, as an example, what happened after the Korean War? The Americans pumped billions and billions and billions and billions and billions in there. Not because they had clever people who the Americans wanted to do, invest into, but because it was a bulwark, however that was pronounced, against North Korea and China and the Soviet Union. And they helped to install a dictatorship there. South Korea was a dictatorship for a very, very long time, and they had Ha Jun Chang. I suggest you check out this guy, Ha Jun Chang. He points out how South Korea followed a very protectionist economic policy. They protected all their industries. They protected the car industry, this industry, that, from any foreign interference. You couldn't sell very easily into Korea. And they developed. They did invest into training and research and development and so on and so forth. All of that stuff African countries, let's say, couldn't do, because they were colonies up to most of them were colonies up to the mid 1960s. And then after that time, the Americans and particularly the British went in there and destabilized the Congo. The Congo could have been Korea, maybe, if Patrice Lumumba and his party had been able to carry on doing what they're doing. Ghana was on that trajectory already, as you know, Brother Oni. Ghana was kind of heading in that direction. Kwame Nkrumah, rest in power, very visionary person who was trying to build up the industrial base and this, that, and the other. They were investing in technical education and so forth. Of course, they kicked him out. The CIA kicked him out because they couldn't have that. And I mean, you said here that, Brother Oni said here, I think the Americans are racist and do think Asians are better at math and science than they are. I do think Africans can do better, but if I was a white guy, I'd go to Asia, cheaper and such. And then last point here, yeah, I agree. They said DRC had one college graduate after colonization, but Japan was like 30% after colonization. Yeah, and that's where Brother Oni's just recently-ish finished a series reading through Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And you see, yeah, Kwame Nkrumah also has some statistics about just how uninterested in the colonialists were in educating the Africans. They had no interest whatsoever, apart from a very, very small, as we read when we read Oyewonka Oyewumi, a very, very small class number of bureaucrats that they wanted to educate. So these people who are running these countries now were themselves raised up by the colonialists to be these bureaucrats and whatnot. But yeah, the point, the anti-blackness point is a very, very key thing to sort of recognize, that the lack of technical prowess, if there is such a lack, in either African American communities or in African communities in other parts of the world or Africa itself, are not the result of the laws of nature or anything like that. Actually, they're a result of very plain and obvious, campaigning work against us, I would say. Brother Oni said, I think African Americans are as expensive as European Americans, but generally have less academics. So if I were a white American, I would skip over whites and blacks in America. All right. Yeah. And it's always important to, there's the sort of idea of like you're being an objectively thinking, cold, rational thinking capitalist, money maker, someone who makes to make money. Certain things would make sense, yeah, if that's all you are. But then every individual person is also a racialized person, is also a gendered person, is also do you know what I mean? A national person is a human, has got everything that being a human involves. Means that the idea of like, people just make decisions based on their self-interests, and that's economic centric self-interest, it just doesn't fit with reality. People do not only make decisions based on self-interest and they can get their cheapest products, buy cheapest and sell highest and so forth, because then they wouldn't, if that was the case, then during Jim Crow, they, why would they hinder themselves from being able to employ Africans, in America? They wouldn't do that. It wouldn't make it harder for themselves to find labor by criminalizing Africans who wanted to try and find a job somewhere, and so on and so forth. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that's clear, but yeah, good detour. It is a, I don't think that Baba Amos's point in this, when he's going through all this thing about not investing in Africa and the investments being in Asia and Europe, I don't think his point is necessarily even to criticize them per se, because the foregoing 266 pages that we've already read I think it's very clear that Barbara Amos Wilson had he expected nothing from them, from white America. He expected absolutely nothing from them. Neither should we, by the way. Expect nothing from them as nation states. His point is just he's outlining, I think, and just showing that this is what's happening, and probably speaking to those amongst us who want to try and maybe appeal to these other people, say, oh, no, come on, be nice to us, give us jobs, probably to appeal to them and just say, appeal to those appealers and say, stop appealing to the conscience of whites or anybody else. Stop it. They're just not going to do it. So his argument is that let's just do it ourselves, mainly. All right. Good. All right. So where are we now? We're on page 267. An hour and 10 minutes. Okay. Probably do a few more pages on this. So the next section is jobs moving abroad, which we will, of course, cover. And then maybe the next bit might be a good place to... Oh, no. Yeah, let's carry on. Two more pages. So page 267 is called Jobs Move Abroad. The magnitude of US foreign direct investment, which involves the founding, development, and expansion of industries abroad, the entering into joint ventures of various types with foreign corporations, the moving of manufacturing facilities abroad, and the like by American transnational corporations, ultimately leads to change in the quantity and character of both the domestic industrial sector and labor force. The US foreign direct investment, along with that of other industrialized Western and some Asian nations, have led to the emergence of a truly global labor force, talented and capable of accomplishing just about anything, anywhere. Fortune magazine goes on to indicate that, quote, a fundamental shift is underway in how and where the world's work gets done. 1993. Just give us 2 seconds. Sorry, guys. Let me just quickly answer this. Make sure you like and subscribe, by the way. Sorry about that. Cool. Yeah. So we will be making this the last. We'll finish on page 269. So what was this? I just said something that was very interesting. Oh yeah. So 1998. This book was written talking about Baba Amos is talking about how work could be done anywhere by anybody, anywhere. Took a while for that to really come into fruition, but we certainly are there now. I have work calls where I'm talking to people in the Philippines to sort something out with some technology, So where are we? Okay. So the fact that work can be done anywhere by anybody at any time has potentially ominous consequences for wealthy industrialized nations, and we may add, Baba Amos is saying, actually ominous consequences for the African American community. The global redistribution of industry brought on by current investment trends and other national and global economic structural dynamics has led to the deindustrialization of much of inner city America, the post-industrial age, the stagnation of the growth of the American manufacturing workforce, which has not expanded much beyond its 1946 level, despite a 5-fold increase in its productivity, and has at least since the 1960s disenabled the richest economy in the world to provide significant full employment at livable wages to lift the 30 to 40% of the African American population above the government's anemic poverty and near poverty thresholds. Not only are industrial facilities moving abroad, so are jobs. As employment of African Americans stagnate and decline, American direct foreign investment appears to be creating jobs abroad, not only in so-called developing and third world nations where wages and other monetary and political costs are low, but in high wage countries like Canada and in Europe. Fortune magazine reports that after a measurable decline in the early 80s, quote, the number of foreign workers employed by the US companies rose by 500,000 between 1986 and 1990 to 6.7 million. Foreign workers employed by, okay. The rearrangement, this is page 268, by the way. The rearrangement of the global workforce, as well as the global redistribution of industry, have led experts to predict that it is a fallacy to think that industry will increase employment overall in the Western world. Western, European, and American employment will just shrink and shrink in an orderly way, like farming at the turn of the century. While discussing the movement of jobs and industrial facilities abroad, we must be careful not to be left with the impression that such jobs are mainly going to low-wage, unsophisticated workers and managers. Quite to the contrary, Fortune magazine reports that increasingly sophisticated work is indeed being parceled out to faraway nations where labor forces are exceedingly capable. It indicates that a vice president in a firm specializing in global manufacturing notes that it indicates that a vice president in a firm specializing in global manufacturing notes that new factories abroad, even in low-wage countries, tend to be more labor efficient than their counterparts in the company's home country. Shout out to you, Shakara. Nice to have you on board, my brother. Hope you're well. Hope you're good. Hope you're good. Everyone check out brother Shakara. Constant stream of really interesting videos and live stream discussions on his channel and also on Gotkush TV. So pleasure to have you on board, my bro. Just at the end of this live stream here. Where are we? It's important to note that the globalization of the service industries and jobs are increasingly being moved abroad in a manner which parallels the movement of blue-collar jobs abroad. This includes managerial, designer, and engineering jobs, as well as research and development work. In many instances, responsibility for design, manufacture, marketing, and profits are being transferred wholesale. This trend in industrial and job movement abroad, as outlined, will most likely be intensified if efforts to eliminate trade barriers between Canada, Mexico, and the United States are successful. The North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, to which these efforts refer, may further erode well over 100,000 or more jobs, especially blue-collar jobs, which describes the larger proportion of jobs in the African American community. In addition, the wages paid to remaining blue-collar workers may stagnate and their rate of growth decline relative to prior decades. The AFL-CIO has predicted a loss of 500,000 jobs as a result of NAFTA. I vaguely remember when NAFTA was like new, a thing, newish thing, and I do vaguely remember wasn't like protest, wasn't the what they're called, the Zapatistas in Mexico. I've got a feeling that movement came into being. Was it on the day that NAFTA was announced in 1994 or whatever it was, came into existence? I believe that's when Field Comandante Marcos and the Zapatistas, what are they called, the FLN, the Chiapas, the movement in Chiapas. I can't remember what it's called in Mexico, but I think that came about on the same day that NAFTA came about, interestingly. So while the actual loss or gain of jobs is difficult to quantify, an indication of the flow of jobs to Mexico may be garnered by the fact that employment in factories constructed by US firms had already climbed, this is in Mexico, from 120,000 in 1980 to 500,000 in 1991. We must keep in mind that the exact outcome of NAFTA is highly uncertain. Certainly, it will eliminate a significant number of jobs. It will also create more jobs, perhaps many more, as US companies processes increased exports to Mexico. One thing is certain, however, the American industrial profile will be markedly changed, page 269. It could be that the shift in the American economic landscape in the long run may be a shift for the better. It may generate new ideas, new products, new markets, and expanding environment, none of which we can perceive at the moment. But we cannot ignore the fact that at this particular moment, or perhaps for a few historical moments more, fundamental changes have and are occurring. Old paradigms, old reliable assumptions and approaches no longer apply. As noted by the Wall Street Journal in October 92, quote, by 1973, Bretton Woods, where statesmen designated the dollar, pegged at $35 an ounce of gold as the centerpiece of international exchange, and set the seal on America as the world's ruling financial power, was dead. Scuttled in large measure by an America no longer willing and increasingly less able to bear its burden. Today, America is $4 trillion in debt. It passed the hat to wage the Persian Gulf War. That's Gulf War I, by the way, for you youngsters who might not remember. There was one before the big one. Before the land invasion one, there was a 1991 one over Kuwait. So they had to beg, borrow, and steal to get that money together. It remains the global leader, but one in the midst of historical transition away from unquestioned supremacy. Since Bretton Woods, by the way, Bretton Woods is the place in America, so it's someplace where the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and I think some other organizations, transnational organizations, if you want to call them that, were set up to basically control the new world order going forward after the 1939 to 45 war. Since Bretton Woods, the global economy has shifted like a tectonic plate. First, the global upheaval reshaped American corporations and American lives. Now, inevitably, it is reshaping American politics as well. The economic shift is starkly visible. Creative destruction, in the Orwellian term coined by the economist Joseph Schumpeter, mowed down 3 million jobs in the 80s. The world's 7 largest banks are now Japanese. The US economy is, unquote, and then last bit from Baba Amos here, the US economy is being shaped profoundly by a global economy over which it is having less direct control and against which it can do less and less to protect its own workforce and maintain its own vaunted high standard of living. The steady stream of remarkably large layoffs, cutbacks, and terminations by big corporations such as IBM, Westinghouse, Boeing, underlines the continuing turmoil in America's corporate economy. It's from the New York Times. The fast-changing economy and its markets, which are compelling more and more companies to shrink or downsize, to remain small and flexible, to engage in new types of relations and corporate partnership arrangements with co- and subcontractors, can no longer provide long-term job security with ample lifetime benefits and guarantees for an increasingly large segment of the workforce. So what I really like about this chapter is that so far, and many chapters in the book, but I like how you read at points like long sections and pages where he might not even be necessarily, Baba Amos might not necessarily even be mentioning race or Africans per se, but he's getting in depth into like understanding the kind of globe, the economic headwinds, and I think that's really important for us as conscious people to make sure that we're not just reading or watching or listening to people in our own spheres talking about topics that we all talk about, as good as they are to talk about. I think it is important for us to sometimes, probably most of the time, be getting in and reading in detail and learning in detail what's happening in the world, what's the state of knowledge in this particular scientific field, or what's happening in the world economic situation. Like Baba Lao Tzu is always coming up with comments about alerting us to stuff that's going on in America, in China, Russia, in the Middle East, and so forth. And I think that's important that we go in depth so that we understand what's the context in which we're kind of operating in. So this chapter is brilliant in that regard so far, because we're really getting a strong, detailed breakdown of the United States' economic situation. So that's us, man. That's us anyway, guys. Thank you so much. Asanteni sana once again for you guys joining us. We should be able to do the same time next week, 10 a.m. Saturday, the 23rd of March. Yeah, at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 3 p.m. UK time. So Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for your input. Thanks for your likes. Thanks for your subscriptions. Thanks for your encouragement. Thanks for your blackness and your uprightness. Have a wonderful rest of the day, weekend, and I will see you guys next time round. All right. Salama. Peace, peace, peace. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody. Asante, asante. Karibu, karibu. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Take care. All right. Peace and blessings.